schools, and some are youth, I understand. And also I'm going to ask Mary to speak to labor trafficking, since we've heard quite a bit about the sex trafficking side.
So thanks again. So Project Free, which is what I manage, is part of the New York Asian Women's Center. We've actually been around for over 30 years now in New York City. Project Free itself has been around since 2005, so this is our 10th year now. We provide quite an array of services, and I just wanted to explain that so that you can have a toolkit of resources for yourself. So one of the things we provide is counseling, which is a lot of what social service providers do. We also provide case management, outreach, legal immigration services. We also have shelter, although as everyone knows, shelter can be very quickly taken because of the need in New York City. We also provide, just general education as well. So that's what Project Free is. We also have our Asian Women Empowerment Program, which is connected to the court, so similar to Restore. We also have that piece to what we do at Project Free. Now, I will speak a little bit more about the reframing that Chris was just talking about. So there is something called labor trafficking, and labor trafficking is a piece of human trafficking. And we actually see about 70% labor trafficked individuals in a given year. And a lot of the common denominator is actually low-wage work. So that's one of the pieces that start to create a vulnerability for many of the women and men that we serve. So I will actually kind of read a story for you. And this is a story that I've spoken about before, so forgive me, I don't see any familiar faces out there. So this is the story of Ruth. And Ruth was 14 when she first came over from China. Her father basically told her, come join me, you can finally reunite with me. She comes over from China, and her dad drops her off at a restaurant that she's working at. And, it's a food type restaurant, and he was telling her that now it was her responsibility to really work for the family, pay off a debt, and if she didn't pay off the debt, her family would be threatened back in China. And the debt was $80,000. And $80,000, is a year for most people is not even a salary. So she was really responsible for carrying this $80,000 debt. And the threats were actually coming from what is the English term for snakeheads. And snakeheads are basically brokers. They can actually be individuals that exploit people, and that is what was happening over in China. But now it's here in New York City. And what ended up happening was Ruth was being approached by customers asking her, you're so young, why are you working at this restaurant? By the way, it's also noon, and 14-year-olds working at a restaurant at noon, should, as what Juanita was saying, that's a red flag right there. So there was that element of truancy. So what ended up happening is she asked if she could go to school by the boss, and the boss said, you're fine to go to school, but we'll have to cut your tips. And already she's making close to nothing, and below minimum wage. So here she is in a predicament. And thankfully she had connected with us. This case actually was a few years before I took on this role. But she connected with us at about 16 years old, and we were able to get her a T visa. So if none of you are aware of the T visa, that's the trafficking visa. And she was actually, good outcome to this is she was able to go to college with the T visa. So some of the things that, I really wanted to highlight for you in that story, it wasn't as visceral of a story as you usually hear. I want you to kind of understand that it's interwoven into the framework of our society. So again, not the dark images and what everybody has been explaining so far at this panel. Someone wasn't locked in a closet, wasn't chained to a bed. These are people in our midst, working in our midst. And the other piece to it is there was language issues. Obviously, the biggest piece is she had a real loyalty to her family. And I think that's something as anyone, immigrants or not, can understand. And the other piece to this is that she was 14, so the vulnerability of youth and rights and understanding these things. Enormous debt, $80,000. It still blows my mind to think that that's how much anybody would owe anyone. And then there were threats, right? And then truancy. So she wasn't going to school, she was there working at a restaurant when she should have been in school. So I just wanted to really leave you with this story because it's something that still speaks to us as an agency, and it transcends the age. As Chris mentioned, our average age at our court program is actually about 45. And, not what you think of even in their early 20s. And for labor trafficking itself, obviously everyone is over 18, at least for those that we have served, and except for what they call the SIJ cases, S-I-J, Special Immigrant Juvenile? That's the SIJ cases. And the other thing I really do want to highlight are that these are human beings. We always talk about trafficking as an issue, and we're talking about human people and lives, and just putting a face. They're around us, they're with us, they work with us. So some of the calls of action that I would like to really talk about are actually two. I've narrowed it down from the three I was thinking about. So one is really be social media savvy. The internet and Googling is something that everyone from every generation is starting to really understand and figure out. So really analyze the content of what you're reading and really get a sense of what's happening locally and nationally, because it really is all tied together. And then the other call to action is really to be compassionate and to believe people. And I think this is something a lot of survivors have told us, is when they tell their story, oftentimes people don't believe them. And being that person that believes them will make a wealth of difference, and it will unlock doors that, for the survivor, for the person listening to the survivor, they did not realize that would happen. So those are the two calls of action.
Thank you, Mary.